We don't know, and we never will, because they had to fight disguised as men. Women weren't allowed to serve in the military 150 years ago. It was even illegal and socially unacceptable just for them to wear pants. So they had to be sneaky about it in order to enlist and serve. We know about the ones who were caught or their story came to light after the war. So estimates range from the hundreds to the thousands. There weren't that many of them, especially when you consider the fact that over 2 million men fought in the Civil War. Their number was insignificant. They did not affect the outcome of any battles, but they're still significant because they were there. They weren't supposed to be. So they gave their lives for the same causes the men did.
Do you have any information why they enlisted, why they put themselves in that kind of danger of being discovered, for one, and of course putting their lives on the line?
There were multiple reasons, and a major reason that they gave was to avoid being separated from loved ones who had gone off to war. In some cases, a husband or a brother was all the family these women had, and so they just did not want to be left home alone, didn't want to be by themselves. And so they donned men clothing and followed these male loved ones to war was one of the major reasons. An economic reason was another. Women did not have many job opportunities, at least decent jobs for decent pay. And so in order to be financially independent, they had to disguise themselves as men to take advantage of jobs denied them because of their gender. And so in some cases, as soon as they enlisted, they were making 3 and 4 times the money that they were in their traditional feminine roles. So that was another reason. Just like the men, these women were adventurous. They were patriotic. In some cases, the reasons that they enlisted were no different than their male counterparts.
What was the penalty if they were caught?
In most cases, they were dismissed and discharged right there on the spot. Some of them were actually sent to prison, still wearing their uniforms, because nobody knew how to deal with them. There was nothing in the military regulations directing the military officials on how to deal with a woman who was caught in a regiment. So they assumed that they were spies or prostitutes or they were crazy or something like that. They just couldn't understand that a woman would leave her domestic sphere in the Victorian time and cross over into a world that was completely closed to them and try to serve in the military. So they didn't know how to deal with them. So they just sometimes ended up sending them to prison. They would serve a few weeks and ultimately they would let them go, and they would just turn around and re-enlist in another regiment.
In your research, did you find any cases where fellow soldiers realized that who they were serving next to was a woman, not a man, but didn't say anything?
Yes. Matter of fact, I talk about one, I believe he was in the 4th Michigan, and wrote a letter home about multiple women that he had been serving with and actually praised them for their skills that they had, as soldiers. He said they were competent soldiers. In some cases, they didn't really say anything, but the officers were ones that if you're a woman soldier, you wanted to avoid an officer because it was an embarrassment to the officers that they were caught, sneaking into their regiment. And then you also saw some cases where a soldier was actually court-martialed. So officers especially did not want to be associated with a woman that was caught in their regiment.
Does your book cover women serving in the Confederate Army and the Union Army?
Yes, in both cases. I have a chapter on women soldiers from Mississippi, and then I have sprinkled throughout women from various other states who came to Mississippi to serve in the battles fought in this state. And then, of course, I have some introductory chapters where I talk about women who were killed or wounded in other battles and then were serving as prisoners of war in prison camps like Andersonville and so forth. So it's not just Mississippi-centric. I do branch out and discuss other topics.
That was my next question about Andersonville or other prison camps. Were they held alongside of the men?
Unfortunately, we don't know a whole lot about them. We're lucky just to have a brief mention in a diary or letter. Example that I talk about in my book is Florina Budwin, which was more than likely not her correct name because these women would give false information when they were discovered just because of the shame and ostracism involved. So we don't even know for sure what regiment she was in. Lots of conflicting information, but she was brought to Andersonville and then transferred to Florence, where ultimately she was discovered in Florence after falling ill and died there and was buried there in Florence National Cemetery. And there are accounts of male soldiers saying that they witnessed her at Andersonville. So again, we don't know a lot of information beyond that.
The name of the book is Behind the Rifle, Women Soldiers in Civil War, Mississippi. We've been speaking with its author, Shelby Harriel. Thank you so much, Shelby.
Thank you for having me.